Quality mode 30 frames per second. That's what most of you are getting. But there's a single setting in Crimson Desert that can nearly double that number. The problem? Turn it on wrong and you get this. Tearing visible, FPS jumping around. I tested 48 different configurations to find the combination that actually works. What's up everyone? After my last video on Crimson Desert's sharpness setting, the users Akane6762 and Dean Stewart 4527 left comments saying they had found a combination of settings that made the quality mode run at nearly 60 FPS. They said the improvement was remarkable, but they couldn't count exact frame rates. So I tested 48 configurations, 3 locations on both consoles with actual frame rate data. And the results are not what I expected. But first, a quick correction from my last video that will make your game look better right now. Let's get into it. Under the comments of my last video, I was keep recommending PSSR sharpness between 35 and 45. That was true in the old patches. I was recommending to keeping them low because of chromatic aberration. But now there's a toggle to turn it off, which Perlebase added in patch 1.04. That's what causes the color fringing at high sharpness values, not PSSR itself. You can go to an accessibility setting in game menu to turn off your chromatic aberration and crank your PSSR sharpness up to 80 or even 100 in some places. The image is significantly cleaner and sharper, but just to warn you, the color artifacts are not completely gone, even with chromatic aberration turned off. But I have been playing at PSSR 80 to 100 with toggle off recently and it looks great. You can try it right now. Here's the setup. 3 test locations, Hernan Market, a heavy area with lots of NPCs, Seas Paloon, one of the most demanding spots in the game, and an open field for lighter scenes. Each location tested in performance, balanced, and quality mode on both PS5 Pro and base PS5. I compared what I'm calling optimized setup. 1440p console output, 4K output toggle off, VSync off against the default setup most people are running. And critically, I ran an isolation test to separate what VSync does from what the output resolution does. Because as I will show you, they do very different things. Let's start with the finding that surprised me. I took the PS5 Pro at default 4K output and changed just one setting, VSync off, nothing else. Same 2160 output, same 4K toggle on. With performance mode at Hernan Market, default VSync on, I got 48 frames per second. And with VSync off, I got 61 frames per second. That's 13 extra frames from one toggle. Balanced mode jumped from 40 FPS to 50 FPS. Quality mode goes from a locked 30 FPS to 40 FPS. VSync in Crimson Desert doesn't just sync your frames to the display, it hard caps your frame rate to the mod's target. 30 for quality mode, 40 for balanced mode, 60 for performance. Turn VSync off and the game renders as fast as it can. The hardware is capable of much more than these caps allows. But here's the catch. Look at the quality mode with VSync off at 4K output. The average is 40 FPS, better than 30. But watch the FPS graph. It's all over the place. The FPS is constantly spiking and dropping. You can see the tearing on screen. It actually feels worse than locked 30 FPS because the frame delivery is so inconsistent. The game is rendering at native 4K, outputting at 4K with no frame sync. The GPU can't deliver frames at a steady pace. Now look at the same mode with 1440 output and VSync off. Average 53 FPS, and look at the FPS graph. It's a nearly flat line compared to the chaos we just saw. The game still renders at native 4K internally, but the display pipeline has less work to do when outputting at 1440p. And that's what stabilizes the frame delivery. So the answer to is it VSync or 1440p? It's both, but for different reasons. VSync off unlocks the frame rate. 1440p output doesn't give you more frames in performance or balanced. In fact, it's slightly lower, but in quality mode, it adds frames and makes them smooth. You need both settings together for best experience. Here you can pause and read this table. This shows all the gains and losses. Here are the complete PS5 Pro numbers, with the optimized setup across all three locations. Performance mode averages about 5 to 9 FPS higher depending on the scene. Balanced mode goes from a locked 40 FPS to the low mid 50s, and quality is the biggest jump, from 30 FPS up to 52 to 57. Except C's Payloon. This area runs at 20 to 29 FPS no matter what you do. Both consoles, all modes, all settings, it's purely CPU limited. No amount of output resolution or VSync tricks can fix a CPU bottleneck. That's on purpose to optimize, even though you might see some spikes, but they're not stable. Base PS5 tells the same story. Performance mode at Hernand, 61 FPS versus 45 FPS on default settings, a 16 frames improvement. Quality mode goes from 30 to 51 FPS. The base PS5 actually shows some of the biggest percentage gains because it starts from a lower baseline. And here's what's surprising. At these optimized settings, the base PS5 keeps up with PS5 Pro. At Hernand Market Performance Mode, base PS5 hits 61 FPS and PS5 Pro hits 57 FPS. The base PS5 is actually faster on paper. But look at the screen. The base PS5 has noticeable tearing. Higher frame rate means nothing as every other frame is torn. The PS5 Pro handles VSync off more gracefully in performance mode. So yes, the base PS5 has higher frame rate numbers, but the PS5 Pro gives you a cleaner experience at a very similar frame rate. Without VRR, without VSync off, causes tearing on both consoles. But the base PS5 suffers more visibly. Now for the question a lot of you asked, does patch 1.05 sharpness enhancement on base PS5 cost any frames? I tested this with everything else identical. Same output, same VSync, same location. The answer is no, zero performance impact. The biggest difference across 9 comparison was less than 2 frames, and that's just measurement noise. Sharpness enhancement is completely free, turn it on, better image quality for nothing. This might be the most surprising part of the entire test. At default settings, 4K VSync on, look at the open field performance mode. The PS5 Pro is hitting 60 frames per second, the base PS5 is at 49. That's an 11 frames gap. In lighter scenes, the PS5 Pro extra GPU power clearly shows. But at Hernand Market, the heavier scene, the gap shrinks just to 3 frames, 48 versus 45. And in balanced and quality mode, within 2 frames, that's basically identical. At C's Payloon, the heaviest scene, there's no meaningful difference. Both are in low 20s, same CPU, same bottleneck. With the optimized settings, the base PS5 actually hits 61 FPS versus on PS5 Pro that is at 57 FPS at Hernand location. Higher numbers, but look at the tearing on the base PS5 side. At default settings, the PS5 Pro wins across the board in performance mode. 60 versus 49 FPS at open field, 48 versus 45 FPS at Hernand location, but look at the balance and quality mode. The gap almost disappears, less than 1 frame in most cases. The PS5 Pro's real advantage is twofold: image quality from PSSR and smoother frame delivery with VSync off. The base PS5 can match the numbers with optimized settings, but not the experience. Of course, these settings do have a visual trade-off. At 1440p output on a 4K TV, you'll see slightly less sharpness, especially in fine detail like foliage and distant textures. Keep in mind, the game is still rendering at native 4K in quality mode on both sides. The only difference is what you sent to your display. On a 1440p monitor, there is no downside at all, since you're running at native resolution. Between PS5 Pro and the base PS5, PSSR upscaling is noticeably cleaner than what the base PS5 delivers, especially in balanced and quality modes, where the internal resolution is lower. That image quality gap is where the PS5 Pro justifies itself. Based on all of this data, here are my recommendations. First, if you have a VRR display, this is just straightforward. Turn VSync off, turn VRR on. VRR handles the tearing for you while keeping your frame rate uncapped. That's the best of both worlds. Set your output to whatever your display supports, 4K or 1440p, and enjoy the higher frame rates with no tearing. PS5 Pro specifically, push your PSSR sharpness to 80 or even 100 with chromatic aberration turned off in accessibility settings. That one change makes a bigger visual difference than any output resolution setting. For base PS5, turn on Sharpness Enhancement. It's completely free, zero performance cost. Performance mode gives you the best frame rate, but balance mode with VSync off is surprisingly good if your display handles tearing or supports VRR. Bottom line, the game caps your frame rate way below what the hardware can actually deliver, and VSync toggle removes that cap. 1440p output helps in quality mode specifically by stabilizing frame delivery, and sharpness enhancement on base PS5 is completely free, no performance cost. The PS5 Pro's advantage over base PS5 is smaller than you would expect, and it's in the image quality, not frame rate. Crimson Desert still has serious CPU issues in heavy areas that no setting will fix, but everywhere else these tweaks makes a real difference. If this was helpful, drop a like. I've got Directive 8020 and Lego Batman comparison videos coming as soon as the games will release. I also have 007 First Light What to Expect video coming. Subscribe so you don't miss them. Let me know in the comments what game you want me to test next. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.